in the heart of a seemingly peaceful neighborhood. A tragedy unfolded that no one could have imagined. A mother of four was gunned down by her neighbor. Her only offense? Letting her children play too loudly outside. What started as a small dispute escalated into an act of senseless violence, leaving a family torn apart and a community in shock. This is a story of a simmering feud that boiled over, of anger and resentment that went unchecked, and of a family that will never be the same. How does a disagreement turn into such a horrific tragedy? What could push someone to commit such an unthinkable act? Stay with us as we uncover the details of this devastating case, one that serves as a chilling reminder of how fragile community ties can be. And don't forget to subscribe for more true crime stories that explore the darkest corners of humanity. Jessica Coleman, 35, was the kind of neighbor everyone wished they had. A loving mother of four, her life revolved around her children. Known for her warm smile, quick laugh, and generous spirit, Jessica was a pillar of her suburban neighborhood. She worked tirelessly to create a nurturing environment where her kids could grow up carefree. Her days were spent juggling work, school pickups, and soccer practice, but she always found time to help a neighbor or organize a block party. To her, the laughter of her kids playing outside wasn't just noise. It was the sound of a happy home. Right next door lived Martha Ellison, 60, a stark contrast to Jessica. Martha had been a resident of the neighborhood for nearly 3 decades. Her house, though well-kept, stood in eerie silence most of the time. Widowed and without close family, Martha had grown increasingly withdrawn and bitter over the years. To many, she was the cranky neighbor who always seemed to find a problem with everything. Martha's complaints were a constant source of irritation for the neighborhood. A barking dog? She was the first to call animal control. A car parked slightly over the curb? Martha would leave a note on the windshield laced with passive-aggressive undertones. But her biggest grievance was noise, particularly the sound of children playing. Martha despised the laughter, the shouting, and the occasional ball bouncing onto her lawn. Unfortunately for Jessica, her kids were exactly the kind of children Martha couldn't stand. Full of energy and enthusiasm, they were always outside, riding bikes, playing tag, and kicking a soccer ball back and forth. Jessica had made it clear to her children to respect Martha's property, but kids are kids, and every now and then a ball would accidentally roll onto Martha's perfectly manicured grass. Each time, Martha would storm outside, her face red with anger, and deliver a stern lecture to whichever child dared retrieve it. The proximity of their homes only intensified the tension, with just a thin wooden fence separating their backyards. Jessica often found herself on edge whenever her children were playing. Despite this, she refused to let Martha's constant complaints rob her kids of their childhood. Children have to play, Jessica would often tell her friends when they expressed concern about Martha. I'm not going to keep them inside all day just to keep her happy. But Martha was far from happy. Over time, her grievances became more personal. She began targeting Jessica directly, complaining about everything from the way Jessica parked her car to how long her lawn took to be mowed. Neighbors started to notice Martha's fixation on Jessica's family. Some even warned Jessica to be careful. One day, an elderly neighbor pulled Jessica aside. "You need to watch out for Martha," she said in a hushed tone. "She's been talking about you and the kids to anyone who will listen. She's always angry. I just don't think it's healthy." Jessica brushed it off with a laugh. "She's just lonely," she replied, trying to stay compassionate despite the circumstances. But deep down, Jessica couldn't ignore the unsettling vibe that Martha gave off. Things took a darker turn when Jessica noticed a pair of her favorite shoes missing from her back porch. At first, she thought one of her kids had misplaced them. But when a neighbor casually mentioned seeing Martha tossing something into her trash bin late at night, Jessica couldn't shake the suspicion. Another time, Jessica came home to find chalk drawings that her kids had done on the sidewalk scrubbed away. Martha had always hated the chalk art, claiming it was an eyesore. Jessica knew confronting her neighbor about these petty incidents wouldn't lead anywhere productive, so she chose to let it go. But the small, passive-aggressive acts continued, fueling a quiet war between the two households. Martha's resentment seemed to grow with each passing day. She began calling Jessica's house late at night, only to hang up as soon as someone answered. Jessica would occasionally catch Martha glaring out her window, watching her kids play as though they were doing something malicious. Despite the mounting tension, Jessica maintained her calm. Her focus remained on her kids and creating a happy home, even if it meant enduring Martha's relentless negativity. Jessica's children, too young to fully understand the dynamic between the adults, began to feel the weight of it. "Mom, why doesn't Miss Martha like us?" Her youngest son asked one afternoon, after retrieving his ball from the neighbor's yard and being met with a harsh scolding. Jessica knelt down to his level, brushing a lock of hair from his forehead. "Sometimes people aren't happy, and they take it out on others," she explained gently. "But that doesn't mean you should stop being kind." For years, Jessica tried to live by that philosophy. She greeted Martha with a smile, even when it wasn't returned. She encouraged her kids to say good morning, despite Martha's icy stares. But the strain of being the bigger person was beginning to take its toll. Martha's bitterness finally reached its breaking point when she began spreading rumors about Jessica around the neighborhood. Some neighbors distanced themselves, while others, familiar with Martha's antics, ignored her entirely. Still, it hurt Jessica to think that her reputation was being tarnished by someone who seemed determined to make her life miserable. Then one fateful day, everything came to a head. Martha had been particularly vocal about the noise from Jessica's backyard that afternoon. Jessica, exhausted from work, decided to let it slide, until she noticed a Facebook post from Martha that indirectly called her out as a terrible mother who doesn't know how to control her kids. The post, coupled with the packs of condoms Jessica found stashed in Martha's trash, added a strange layer to the already tense relationship. Jessica couldn't understand why Martha would harbor such hatred. She replayed every interaction in her mind, searching for a clue, a trigger, something that explained Martha's hostility. But no reason seemed sufficient to justify the level of animosity she was experiencing. The tension between Jessica Coleman and Martha Ellison had reached a boiling point. Each day brought new frustrations, new slights, and a growing sense of unease that neither woman could ignore. Little did anyone know, their quiet suburban street was about to become the backdrop for a tragedy no one could have anticipated. It was a warm, sunny afternoon, and Jessica Coleman was in her kitchen preparing lunch for her children. The cheerful sounds of laughter and play filled the air as her kids rode their scooters along the sidewalk outside. Jessica peeked out the window, smiling as she watched her youngest, 7-year-old Mia, try to keep up with her older siblings. To her, this was what life was all about, her kids happy, carefree, and safe. But for Martha Ellison, Jessica's next-door neighbor, that laughter was like nails on a chalkboard. Martha, a woman who seemed perpetually stuck in a state of irritation, had already shouted twice that day for the kids to keep it down. The noise grated on her nerves, exacerbating her long-standing disdain for Jessica's family. Over the years, Martha had grown increasingly hostile toward Jessica, blaming her for every minor inconvenience in the neighborhood. If a stray ball rolled onto her lawn or a bike tire left a mark on her driveway, Martha was quick to accuse Jessica's children of disrespecting her property. That day, Martha had been sitting on her porch, scowling as she watched the kids play, when a red plastic ball bounced toward her yard. She sprang up from her chair. Grabbing the ball, she hurled it back with all her strength, narrowly missing 8-year-old Michael. "Stay away from my house," Martha shouted, her voice shaking with anger. "I'm tired of you brats thinking you can do whatever you want." Jessica heard the commotion and stepped outside to see what was going on. Her heart sank when she saw her children huddled together, visibly shaken, with Martha standing at the edge of her yard, glaring at them. "Martha, what's going on now?" Jessica asked, walking toward her neighbor. She kept her tone calm, though her patience was wearing thin. "They're always in my yard, always making noise." Martha snapped, "I've had enough of it." Jessica sighed. "They're just kids, Martha. They're not hurting anyone." Martha muttered something under her breath and stormed back inside, slamming her door. Later that afternoon, Jessica's 10-year-old son Elijah came running into the house, his face pale and his hands trembling. Mom, he gasped. Martha threw a roller skate at Mia. Jessica froze. "Is she okay?" Elijah nodded but added, "She's crying." Martha was yelling at us again. Furious, Jessica marched outside to find Mia sitting on the curb, tears streaming down her face. Her pink scooter lay on the ground, one of the handles scratched from where it had hit Martha's fence. Jessica's heart ached as she knelt beside her daughter, wiping away her tears. "Don't worry, sweetheart," Jessica said softly. "Mommy's going to take care of this." Determined to address Martha's escalating hostility once and for all, Jessica decided to confront her neighbor. She brought Elijah along, hoping his presence might help Martha see reason. Jessica wasn't looking for a fight. She just wanted to protect her children and set boundaries. As they approached Martha's house, Elijah hesitated. "Mom, do we have to? She's really scary." Jessica placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "It'll be fine, Elijah. I just want to talk to her." They reached Martha's front door, and Jessica knocked firmly. From inside, they could hear Martha's TV blaring, but there was no response. Jessica knocked again, louder this time. "Martha, it's Jessica," she called out. "We need to talk." After a long pause, the TV volume lowered, and heavy footsteps approached the door. "What do you want?" Martha's voice came through the door, sharp and defensive. Jessica took a deep breath. "We need to talk about what happened earlier. You can't keep throwing things at my kids." "Go away, Jessica," Martha snapped. "I don't have time for this." "I'm not leaving until we talk," Jessica insisted. "You cross a line today, Martha." Inside, Martha's frustration boiled over. Her hands trembled as she grabbed the revolver she kept hidden in a drawer near the front door. She didn't even think. Her anger had consumed her. Jessica knocked again, and this time her voice was firm. "Martha, I'm not going to let this slide. You owe my kids an apology." That was the last straw for Martha. Without warning, she raised a gun, pointed at the door, and pulled the trigger. The deafening crack of the gunshot echoed through the house and down the street. Jessica staggered backward, clutching her chest. Her face was a mask of shock and pain as she fell to ground. Elijah screamed, his voice piercing the air. "Mom!" he cried, dropping to his knees beside her. "Mom, wake up!" Neighbors came running, drawn by the sound of the gunshot and Elijah's desperate cries. One of them, a retired nurse, knelt beside Jessica and tried to stop the bleeding. "Call 911, the nurse shouted, pressing her hands against Jessica's chest to stem the flow of blood. Elijah clutched his mother's hand, tears streaming down his face. "Please, Mom," he whispered. "Please don't leave me." Inside her house, Martha stood frozen. The reality of what she'd just done began to sink in. She dropped the gun, her hands trembling. Through the door, she could hear the chaos outside, the cries for help, the sound of approaching sirens. Panic set in, but it was too late to undo what had happened. When the police arrived, they found Jessica unresponsive and Elijah in hysterics. Jessica was rushed to the hospital, but the wound was too severe. Despite the medical team's best efforts, she was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. The police surrounded Martha's house and ordered her to come out with her hands up. For a moment, she considered staying inside, locking the door, and pretending it had all been a mistake. But deep down, she knew there was no escaping the consequences of her actions. Slowly, she opened the door and stepped outside, her hands raised. The officers cuffed her and led her to a waiting squad car as the neighbors looked on in stunned silence. Elijah watched from the sidewalk, his mother's blood still staining his clothes. One of the officers approached him and gently guided him away from the scene. "We'll take care of you, buddy," the officer said softly. "You're not alone." The scene outside Martha Ellison's home was chaotic, a stark contrast to the quiet suburban neighborhood it had been just hours before. Police officers cordoned off the area with yellow tape. Neighbors gathered in small clusters, whispering in shock, while Jessica Coleman's children huddled together, being comforted by kind strangers. 10-year-old Elijah, who had witnessed everything, was still in tears, trying to process what had just happened. As officers entered Martha's home, they found her sitting in her living room, seemingly dazed. The revolver lay on a small table near the front door, a chilling reminder of what had just transpired. Martha didn't resist as the officers approached her. "You're under arrest for the shooting of Jessica Coleman," one officer said as he handcuffed her. Martha's only response was a mutter. She was trying to break in. But the officers had already started piecing together a different narrative, one that would soon expose the truth. The police quickly realized that Martha's claim of self-defense didn't align with the evidence. Forensic experts found no signs of forced entry at her front door, refuting her assertion that Jessica had been trying to break into her home. The door showed no damage, and the locks were intact. It was clear Jessica had been standing outside when she was shot. More damning was the account from Elijah, Jessica's 10-year-old son, who had been right beside his mother during the confrontation. Tearfully, he told officers, Mom was just knocking. She didn't try to break in. She just wanted to talk to Miss Martha. His statement painted a heartbreaking picture of a mother simply trying to protect her children from an aggressive neighbor, not someone attempting to harm her. Elijah's words were corroborated by several neighbors who had heard Jessica knocking and calling out to Martha moments before the gunshot. As detectives dug deeper into the case, they uncovered a pattern of hostility from Martha toward Jessica and her family. Several neighbors came forward, describing incidents where Martha had yelled at Jessica's children, accusing them of being too noisy or trespassing near her yard. She always complained about those kids. One neighbor testified, but they were just playing like any kids would. She couldn't stand the sound of their laughter. Another neighbor shared an incident where Martha had thrown water at the children while they were playing on the sidewalk, yelling, "Go play somewhere else." Jessica herself had confided in a close friend about her difficulties with Martha. She said Martha didn't like her. The friend revealed. Jessica thought it was because of how much her kids played outside. She never imagined it would come to this. As more testimonies emerged, it became evident that Martha's animosity toward Jessica's family wasn't just about noise. Several neighbors recalled hearing Martha make racially charged comments about Jessica and her children. She called them a nuisance and said things like, "People like them don't belong here," one neighbor reported. These revelations added another layer of outrage to an already horrific incident. Community members, particularly Jessica's friends and supporters, began to question whether racial bias had fueled Martha's hostility and ultimately her decision to shoot. With the evidence stacked against her, Martha was formally charged with manslaughter. She was taken into custody and booked at the local jail. The news of her arrest spread quickly, igniting a wave of anger and grief throughout the community. For Jessica's children, the loss of their mother was devastating. Elijah, who had seen everything, was particularly traumatized. "He keeps asking why," a family friend said. "Why would someone do this to his mom? How do you explain something like that to a child?" As details of the case became public, the community's grief turned to outrage. Vigils were held in Jessica's memory, with neighbors and local activists demanding justice. Signs reading "Justice for Jessica" and "Stop the Hate" were placed on lawns and at the entrance to the neighborhood. Martha had no right to take Jessica's life. One community leader said at a vigil, "This was an act of hatred. Plain and simple. We won't rest until justice is served." The media picked up the story, drawing national attention to the case. Many pointed out the broader implications of the incident, highlighting issues of racial tension and gun violence in suburban communities. As Martha sat in jail awaiting her first court appearance, she maintained her claim of self-defense. She was trying to break in, she told detectives during an initial interview. "I was afraid for my life." But her story quickly unraveled under scrutiny. The lack of forced entry, the testimony from Elijah and other neighbors, and her history of animosity toward Jessica's family painted a picture of someone who had acted out of anger, not fear. Martha's lack of remorse further alienated her from the community. When asked by detectives if she regretted her actions, she responded, "I did what I had to do. Maybe now they'll leave me alone." Jessica's family, meanwhile, focused on ensuring her children were cared for and supported through their grief. A GoFundMe campaign was set up to help cover expenses for children, and the community rallied around them, offering meals, babysitting, and financial assistance. "Martha may have taken Jessica from us," said a family friend, "but she can't take away the love this community has for her kids. We'll make sure they know how much their mother was loved." As the investigation concluded and the case prepared to go to trial, one thing was clear. Jessica Coleman's life was taken far too soon, but her memory would live on in the hearts of those who loved her. For Martha, however, the road ahead would be long. marked by the weight of her actions and the justice she would soon face. The courtroom was packed with Jessica Coleman's family, friends, and members of the community who had watched the tragedy unfold. Emotions ran high as Jessica's family took the stand, one by one, to recount the devastating impact of her loss. Her mother, holding back tears, spoke about Jessica's unwavering love for her children and her dream of raising them in a safe, happy environment. She was the glue that held our family together. Her voice trembled. Now we're left with a hole that can never be filled. Jessica's 10-year-old son, who had witnessed a shooting, was represented through a victim advocate. His words were read aloud to the court, painting a picture of a young boy traumatized by a moment that would haunt him forever. "I miss my mom every day," his statement read. "She was my hero." The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating. They argued that Martha Ellison's actions stemmed not from fear, but from deep-seated anger and prejudice. They painted a picture of a woman who had harbored hostility toward Jessica and her children for years, hostility that escalated to a boiling point on that tragic day. Prosecutors highlighted Martha's repeated complaints, her history of confrontations, and her use of racial slurs, presenting these as evidence of her animosity. The pivotal piece of evidence was Jessica's 10-year-old son's testimony. He stated that his mother had knocked on Martha's door to talk, not to threaten or break in. The prosecution also presented the roller skate Martha had thrown at Jessica's children earlier that day, arguing it demonstrated her escalating aggression. This was not a case of self-defense, the prosecutor declared. This was a premeditated act of rage. Martha's defense team, however, relied heavily on Florida's controversial Stand Your Ground law. They argued that Martha felt threatened when Jessica knocked on her door. She was an elderly woman living alone, the defense attorney stated. When Jessica approached her home, Martha believed she was in imminent danger. The defense attempted to paint Jessica as confrontational, but their efforts fell flat against the prosecution's evidence and the overwhelming support for Jessica's character in the community. Witnesses, including neighbors and friends, refuted claims that Jessica had been aggressive, describing her instead as kind and peace-loving. When the verdict was announced, the courtroom held its breath. After hours of deliberation, the jury found Martha Ellison guilty of manslaughter. Gasps filled the room, followed by tears from Jessica's family and nods of solemn agreement from many in attendance. The judge sentenced Martha to 25 years in prison, citing the senselessness of her actions and the devastating impact on Jessica's children. "Your anger cost an innocent woman her life and left a family shattered," the judge stated firmly. As Martha was led away in handcuffs, she showed no visible remorse, further enraging the community. Outside the courthouse, supporters of Jessica's family gathered, holding candles and pictures of the young mother who had been taken too soon. For Jessica's family, the sentencing provided some measure of justice, but the pain of her loss would never fade. The community vowed to honor her memory, ensuring her children were surrounded by love and support in the years to come. Jessica Coleman's death left an indelible mark on her family and the neighborhood. Her 4 children, now motherless, were taken in by her mother, who vowed to raise them with the same love and strength Jessica had embodied. "They've lost their guiding light," a family friend shared, "but the community has stepped up to ensure they'll never be alone." Jessica's legacy as a devoted mother and active member of the community inspired an outpouring of support. A local park was renamed in her honor, with a plaque that read, "In memory of Jessica Coleman, a mother, a friend, a light to us all." Her story became a rallying cry for neighbors to address tensions and foster unity, ensuring no one else would suffer such a tragic fate. The case also sparked broader conversations about Florida's Stand Your Ground laws. Many argued the laws were misused in Martha Ellison's defense, citing her long history of hostility and prejudice. Advocates called for reform, emphasizing the need to address racial bias in the application of self-defense laws. This wasn't about protecting oneself, a community leader said. This was an act of senseless violence rooted in anger and intolerance. Jessica's death also forced the neighborhood to confront uncomfortable truths about division and prejudice within its ranks. Many vowed to do better, organizing community events and creating spaces for dialogue. But for others, the tragedy remained a haunting reminder of how quickly things can escalate when animosity is left unchecked. The Coleman children, though scarred by the loss of their mother, became symbols of resilience. Supported by their family and neighbors, they began to heal, carrying Jessica's legacy forward with every step. Jessica Coleman's story is one of love, betrayal, and the devastating consequences of unchecked anger. It raises questions that linger long after the courtroom verdict. Was this truly a case of self-defense? Or was it a senseless act of violence fueled by prejudice? Could the tragedy have been avoided? Or was it the inevitable result of years of growing animosity? What do you think? Could better communication or community intervention have prevented this heartbreaking loss? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice matters in these important conversations. And if you're captivated by true crime stories like this one, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell to stay updated on more gripping cases that dive into the complexities of human behavior and the justice system.